In a previous video, when we talked about strings, we said how strings had methods. Methods were like functions, but we called them slightly differently. If I had a string A, B, C, A, and I wanted to count the number of times that A appears in that string, I needed to use a method. In the method call, I would take the first argument, in this case ABCA, and I wouldn't put it inside of parentheses. Instead, I would type it first. Then I would type a period. Then I would type the name of the method, in this case count. I would give it some parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, I would give it any additional arguments that I need. Suppose I'm searching for this letter A. All right, that gives me the value 2. All right, well, we've had quite a bit of experience with string methods by now, so they're not that strange. But the reason why I bring this up is because some objects have methods too. I'm going to import intro CS. I'm going to make 2 points. One is the point 1, 2, 3, and the other is the point at the origin. And suppose what I want to do is I want to compute the distance between the 2 points. There's no function that does that. Oh, but there is a method. Now the method call here behaves just the same way as they do for string methods. The first argument is going to have to go before the name. All right, but which one is first, P or Q? Well, I mean, look, they're both objects. It doesn't really matter, but let's assume we're going from P to Q. If that's the case, we're going to type P first, then a period, and now the name of the method. And the name of the method is exactly what you think it is, distance. Now some parentheses, and now any additional arguments. I want to go from P to Q, so Q is an additional argument. And look at that. It tells me that the value of the distance is, well, a float. Let's look at this in the Python tutor just to be absolutely clear what's going on here. So I'm going to visualize. I'm going to create the 2 objects for P and Q, and as you can see, the folder's there. Now I'm about to call the method distance here, but before I do that, let's notice something. I said in a previous video that dot means inside of. And in fact, when we have modules, functions live inside of modules. Do methods live inside of objects? That's a really good question. And we're not going to answer it right now because it's actually more complicated than you think. If you notice, we don't actually display them inside of the Python tutor. And the reason why we don't do that is, look, we mainly care about attributes because X, Y, and Z, they can change. And that's the reason why we care about these folders. Distance is not an attribute that we can change. So right now, we're not going to draw it and we're not going to worry about it. But it is there. And so I can call it and it produces a value and I reassign it to X. So, okay, look. If we understand methods for strings, we can understand methods for objects. Oh, except one thing. I'm going to make the string ABC, and I'm going to assign it to the variable S. Now, strings have a method called replace. It allows me to substitute one letter for another. So I can substitute A with C. And so ABC becomes CBC. But if I look at the original S, it's unchanged. Replace makes a copy, right? I never modify the argument. Oh, but remember the case with objects, right? I had functions that were normal functions that, well, they returned a value, but they didn't actually modify the argument. We would call these immutable functions. On the other hand, we had these mutable functions that could actually alter the object that I passed as an argument. The same is true as methods. Some methods are normal. They don't modify the object. They're immutable. Distance is an example of that. But there are some methods that can modify the object argument. Let's remind ourselves, P is the point 1, 2, 3. I'm going to call a new method. The method I'm going to call is clamp. Clamp takes some additional arguments. The additional arguments are a range. What clamp is going to do is it's going to modify this object P. It's going to take all of the attributes and it's going to crush them so they fit in this range. If it's below 1.5, it's going to raise it up. If it's above 2.5, it's going to pull it down. All right? Like, it looks like it did something, but more importantly, if I look at P, P has been permanently altered. This is a mutable method. Let's go look at this in the Python tutor just to be absolutely clear. I'm going to visualize this. I'm going to create my point P, and now I'm going to call the method. Pay close attention to the folder here. You'll notice that the folder is modified. Okay, all right, look, that's not this scary, right? If you can understand the difference between immutable functions and mutable functions, you can understand the difference between immutable methods and mutable methods, right? They're just called differently. The bigger question is, how did I know about all these methods? How did I know that point 3 objects have a distance method? How did I know about clamp? How did I know that clamp modified but distance didn't? Well, like I know about anything in this class, I read the documentation. Let's go to the web page here. We're looking at the Intro CS package. I'm going to go to the geometry classes. I'm going to click on point 3. We have the attributes listed, but right below this, notice that it says immutable methods. And there we see distance right there. It's fruitful. It returns a value. If I continue scrolling down, I see mutable methods. And there's my clamp. Mutable methods are methods that modify the underlying object. Look, I understand that in this video series we've covered a lot and it can be overwhelming, but we're going to get a lot of practice with objects in this semester, and so you will definitely master them when you're done. But with that said, I just want to remind you that anytime that you're feeling overwhelmed, this is why the documentation exists. Go to the documentation, and a lot of times it has the answers that you're looking for.